Come to order. We will do the first order of the minutes. Let's approve minutes of last time. You have before you the minutes of last meeting. I'd like to ask if there is any addition or correction to those minutes.
I was here for the last meeting, and my name is not there.
Who is speaking?
Michael Miller.
Michael? Okay, so you're going to abstain, or you're okay to vote, as long as you've read them and you're okay.
No, all I'm saying is my name was not on here.
Got it. Tricia, you have that input? Please correct the minutes from last time that we have a correction on attendance. All right, very good. Any other input? All right, can we have a motion to approve or disapprove? Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Russell,
For approval.
Mr. Price,
For the motion.
Ms. Denny,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlecore, Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud,
For the motion.
and Mr. Thorpe.
For the motion.
Thank you. I just would like to remind everybody to speak into the microphones. It's very important. Thank you.
Well, I'm guilty. I need to do that too, because my voice is softer than I'd like. The Lord bless me with a little soft voice. Okay, first question, before we get into the judicial part of the agenda, I'd like to ask a question. We're going to do an item on, let's see, it's item 5, which is pretty far down the agenda. Who is here to speak to the lot split on Central Boulevard? Would you just slip your hand up and get a notion of how many we want to talk about that? Okay, great. And if you want to speak, while we're doing business, you might just kind of walk up here and get a sheet, if you haven't already, that you want to hand it in with your name and address on there that you want to speak. Anthony, do we swear everybody in before we get into that? If we have everybody fill out a request to speak, do we need to swear everybody in at the beginning?
We can. We usually do it collectively. If anybody wants to present evidence regarding the proposed application, including the applicant, we would swear them in as a group. But
Okay, I'll ask it then before we get ready to do business, to see if they have to submit evidence. Well, even if it's the evidence of I live here and I have input, that's evidence, is it not?
well, I mean, if it's factual evidence or
Yeah.
they're
Anecdotal.
yeah, I mean, if they're presenting like expert testimony, of course, you have to swear in. If it's going to be factual evidence that they would like the board to consider, we'd have them sworn in. If it's just some general comment, that really isn't, evidence-based, then they feel free to just generally speak.
Okay, thank you. All right, my first, a little. Is the green light on?
No, the green light's not on.
There you go. Okay, volume's on. I'm going to back away till it sounds about right. Okay. Since we have interest in that lot split item, number 5 on the agenda, let's move it up. And could I ask for a motion from the board to move item 5 up to item 2, to the beginning?
Yeah, I move we can move item 5 up to in front of item.
Okay, can we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good. We have moved that item up to the beginning so that if our people are interested enough to come and give input and be concerned, and we owe it to them to use their time quickly and efficiently. So here we go. We have moved that item, consideration and recommendation regarding lot split for property located at East Central Boulevard and Ridgewood Avenue. And you see the parcel numbers in there. And it's requested by Mike DeChristopher. See, is he here? Thank you. And if you wish to speak, would you just fill out one of those forms and give it to, give it to the, Thank you. All right. So, David, we'll ask you to introduce us to that subject and lead us into it. And then we will have our regular treatment of the subject by the board. And then we'll ask for input or any thoughts from our neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, back one. It's back two at this point. One more?
Yeah.
All right, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Good evening. It's nice to have a full body here tonight. I think it's been a while since we've had that, so it's great. Welcome, everybody. And welcome everybody in the audience as well. I concur with the chairman. It's great to have people interested enough coming out and speaking to us. I will go ahead and read portions of the agenda cover into the record. Hopefully they're the pertinent points that will stimulate some conversation and discussion. And I will begin under the summary section. To reiterate, the request is for a lot split for two parcels. And the agenda cover provides those parcel numbers. They do not have addresses yet, as they are not built on. And that's typical. The parcels are zoned R1, which is the most restrictive, if you want to use that term, zoning district we have in the city. Thanks a lot. R1 only allows single-family development. So we're not here this evening talking about rezoning the parcel. We're only talking about dividing a parcel into two pieces. Parcel 1, which is the northern parcel, is thank you, Pat, is 0.21 acres, which works out to be 9,147 square feet. And parcel 2, the southern piece, is 0.18 acres, which works out to be 7,840 square feet. The current owner purchased the parcels in July of 2018. The individual approached the city interested in developing homes on those two parcels, single-family homes. Well, that's when the problem arose. After doing a little research in our records, we determined that the pieces of property never were properly subdivided through the city's process. And I'll kind of emphasize the city's process because that becomes important as we get into dig a little deeper into this case. At some point prior to Mr. DeChristopher purchasing the property, a previous owner had subdivided the tract. I call it the parent tract or the original tract. At one point, these two parcels were a single parcel. Okay. And generally what happens is that an owner can get a survey. Get a surveyor to come out and do a survey for you, create legal descriptions for two parcels, in this case, two parcels. And then they can take that survey down to south of us to Viera, go to the clerk of courts and record those surveys. And the clerk of courts and therefore the property appraiser will show two parcels in their records for their purposes. Now, so we have that tract going on, but we have this other tract over here that should be followed as well, and that's the city subdivision process. In this case, this tract, the city tract, was not followed, and we're trying to go after the fact and address that. The agenda cover goes into some significant detail about how this happens between the Brevard County Property Appraiser and the Clerk of Court and the city's actions, and why it happens. And this is why we're here this evening illustrates the situation that can arise when the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, essentially. The City of Cape Canaveral's subdivision code has always required the division of land into 2 or more parcels to be platted. So that was one of the things that we looked at. The question arose, well, maybe back in the day when these lots were subdivided, when that parent tract was subdivided into 2 lots, the city didn't have subdivision requirements. There was no requirement to come to the city and follow our process. Well, digging through the codes, we determined that was not the case. The city has always had on its books, since incorporation, the requirement to subdivide property. Okay?
According to the city's procedure.
Correct. Now, we've always had the platting requirement. In 2010, the final paragraph in the first page of the agenda cover talks about the city established a lot split process. And the lot split process is to be used and is available for individuals who want to split their parcel into exactly 2. So lot splits can be used for 2 parcels. If you want to do 3 or more, you have to go through our platting process. Okay, so there's 2 different processes, lot splits and platting. That's why we're processing this as a lot split this evening, because it's only splitting the parent tract into 2.
In corollary to that, we have an item on the agenda tonight where we're going to
Plat, that's correct.
3 different lots
Correct. That's
in the
exactly
same
right.
block.
Exactly
Okay,
right.
So 2 processes. Go ahead.
I'm on the top of page 2 now. Notwithstanding these requirements, some property owners in Cape Canaveral prior to 2010 apparently subdivided their land by recording deeds with the clerk of court without notifying the city and following the city's subdivision requirements. And this is important. The city has to keep track of these lot splits and these divisions of parcels for a number of reasons. One of the most important is that as this board knows, in zoning districts, there's a number of important things that we have to monitor. Like for R1, for instance, in this zoning district, R1 requires lot size, minimum lot sizes of 7,500 square feet. If someone were just to take us, technically they could go down to the clerk and record a bunch of 7,000 square foot lots that are zoned R1, and the city has no knowledge of it, has no say. Obviously, we wouldn't have allowed that since it doesn't meet the minimum requirements of R1. Fortunately, in this case, the 2 parcels do meet the area and dimensional requirements of the R1 district, so we're fortunate there.
May I add to it?
Mhm.
So the reason we need for the city to know that the land has been the lot has been split is before you can issue a building permit, you have to know what you're talking about. Which lot are we talking about? And the building permit references that specific piece of property.
Yeah, that's one of the reviews that we do when we go into issue a building permit is we go back and look at the records and make sure that these are established lots. And that's what triggered this whole issue. We went back, our building department started looking into this. So these lots don't exist in our records. And so that's kind of why we're here this evening. But that's correct. This is subdividing and lot splits are one of the important ways we implement our zoning ordinance and zoning standards. Now, as the staff report indicates, this is an after-the-fact lot split. So this is kind of a unique situation. Generally, the process would be come in and get the lot split first, or concurrently with going down and recording those documents with the county. But we're kind of going about it backwards on this one. So that's why we're here this evening. And that's why it's referenced as an after-the-fact lot split. Now, when the city established its lot split process in 2010, the next section of the staff report, 9866, goes through a number of criteria that must be met, or at least the P&Z board and the city council need to consider as they're deliberating over an application and a request. And I'll just go over those very briefly. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's about 8 of them. The proposed lot split in every respect meets the criteria established elsewhere in that section of the city code. The application is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The application does not create any lots, tracts, or developments that do not conform to the city code. The application provides for proper ingress and egress. The application is compatible and in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood, including with respect to the size of existing surrounding lots. The application does not create burdensome congestion on the streets. The application promotes the orderly layout and use of land. The application provides for adequate light and air. The application does not create overcrowding of land. And finally, the application does not pose any significant harm to the adequate and economical provision of water, sewer, and other public services. Well, after each of those criteria in italics is a staff response to each one of those. And I can just wrap it up very quickly by saying, I'll just read the final sentence or two at the bottom of page 2. As the request is consistent with applicable regulations, staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Board make a favorable recommendation to the council on the lot split application. One thing I want to kind of nip before it's, because Mr. Chairman and I spoke about this earlier today, is that the aerial that you have in front of you and that the audience can see is the particular lots in question are shown in red there at the, as we indicated, the eastern terminus of East Central. The important criteria that I think a lot of people are focusing on is criteria E. The application is compatible and in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood, including with respect to the size of existing surrounding lots and development trends. I think I'm going to point to a couple of key words that jump out at me on this. Is compatible and in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood. I think as we look at this area, we can all have different ideas of what the neighborhood consists of and what the boundaries of the neighborhood are. But I included this aerial to give an indication of the various lot sizes in this specific, I'll say, neighborhood. We can see to the west, moving from your left to right as we go towards North Atlantic on Central, there are some larger lots. Those were historic lots. Those have been there since the incorporation of the city, as far as I can tell. The subject parcel shown in red, the parcels, and then there's 4 to the immediately to the west of those. Those were all created, in my estimation, without city approval. Now, we're not here to talk about all that, but I'm just indicating, I think those, at one point, these 3 lots that you can see have been divided into 6 lots were the large lots like what exists further to the west. Now, to the north of this, you've got Ocean Woods, which obviously has very small lots. They're townhouses. To the south of this, you've got lots that you've got a mixed bag. You've got some larger lots. You've got some lots that are fairly consistent with what's being proposed here this evening. And this is on the south side of East Central. So, and then you've got some very large lots to the east on the beach, of course. Point is that you've got a mixed bag here in this neighborhood. And so that is the reason that, yes, you do have larger lots in the area, and you have smaller lots in the area, and you have lots that are the same size. So it's really going to be, I think it would be difficult for me to say that these proposed lots are not consistent with the neighborhood. That's my opinion, and obviously the board is free to.
Say that again?
In my estimation, the proposed lots are consistent and in harmony with the neighborhood as far as the lot sizes go.
And the lot sizes do meet the lot size requirement.
That's correct. And
Yeah.
what, and
Each-
what,
Each individual divided lot meets the requirement of a minimum of 7,500 square feet for a
That's correct.
single-family dwelling.
that's correct.
Okay, go on.
And really, the final thing I want to say is what's being proposed will be single-family homes. That's consistent with the area, as far as to the west and to the south. Obviously, you've got townhomes to the north, and you've got larger resort projects to the east. So, anyways, Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes my presentation. Patty, you want to forward one, and that'll be a picture of the actual lot split? Okay. Anthony, is there anything I missed that you think we need to mention? Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay. So the reason we did this is to convince ourselves and our neighbors and everybody that we've looked at all the considerations. We know that there are concerns about compatibility with the neighborhood. And we want you to know that we've looked at it. We didn't ignore it. And we have not made a decision on it. That's what we'll do tonight after we hear all the puts and takes. But so far, the puts are that they meet, the owner meets all the requirements to subdivide the parcel into two lots. It has adequate area. It has adequate setbacks. It has, well, that's it. It has adequate property to do the subdividing or subdividing long-term division. Now, what I'd like to do is go from one end of the panel to the other. I ask if each panel member has any input about the subject. And we'll start with lost my script. Anyway, on my left, Eugene, we'll ask if you have any input or questions.
No, it appears that that he does meet the requirements of the city. And I don't see any problems or issues.
Okay, as you go down through there, you have to ask yourself if they meet each one of these. And the one that's the main question is to our neighbors is subparagraph E. The application, is it compatible and in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood? That's the question we ask ourselves. What do you think?
I think it is.
Okay, fair enough. Anything else? Okay, next, Stephen?
Yes, I see it as compatible and in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood. I don't
Mr.
see any
Chairman?
issue with it.
Excuse me, before, may I suggest that if any of the board members has any questions with Mr. Dickey regarding the staff report, now would be an appropriate time. Short of that, I would suggest that you take the applicant, have them come forward and make their presentation to the board so you can hear their view, and then possibly take some additional, questions if necessary, before any of the board members draws a conclusion.
Okay, and just to go back and forth on it, I would never omit the applicant.
No,
And
I'm
I
just
would,
suggesting maybe a little bit different order.
the order
that's all.
we do it is, okay. Very good, I appreciate that. So you're suggesting let's hear from the applicant next.
Questions regarding the staff report to Mr. Dickey? Sure, now would be the appropriate time to do that. And then I would suggest that the next order of business would be to hear from the applicant and then take any other testimony that you may need or, from other members of the public that are here before drawing a conclusion on any aspect of the application.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And let's do that. Let's ask the board if there are any questions to Mr. Dickey regarding the staff report.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
I believe in this application, they want to waive the setback on one side. And what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think I don't think people can waive setbacks. There's setbacks that apply to every piece of property in the city. Now, certain owners may want to ask a variance to get a different setback than what the code requires, but that's a completely different process. That will go to the Board of Adjustment after a noticed, that decision will be made at a noticed public hearing. And there's different criteria and things that we'll look at when a variance request is being in front of us. But waiving setbacks is not something we do.
I'm sorry, I had the wrong firm. I just know that the one on the corner there, they were asking.
Yeah.
for-
Yeah, because this is a corner lot, it technically, for purposes of our code application, it has 2 front yards. So each of those street frontages is considered a front yard. They'll have to meet in R1, I think it's 25 feet. Rear yard I believe in R1 is 25 feet as well. And side setback is 8 feet opposite the road. So they've got 3 25ers and an 8. So it's a tight lot, the corner one. And should the applicant want to deviate from those, then there's a process for that, but that's a separate process.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't know if that was part of this package.
Yeah, he indicated those on there, but that was more for informational purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a way we could get the gentleman outside to go somewhere else or stop for a while so we conclude this meeting? We don't need that noise.
Yeah, no, it's certainly.
Ask him to come back later or do something, but he's doing his job. No penalty for that. He's just doing his job, but we're doing ours too.
Yeah.
Well, back to the question that was asked, you can ask for a setback to be moved. But you don't get it unless you process code.
I'll learn my terminology better.
No,
So you did fine. You're doing your job.
I had to try to find it in.
No, I mean, actually, I think the point being raised is a good one. The applicant asked in conjunction with submitting the application, and I think you read the attorney's memo about consideration of the setback. And I don't believe staff is making any recommendation on setback waivers or variances. But there was a note in one of the initial letters in the application, so I think that's what you probably picked up in reading the package. So that clears the air on that is not being considered this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Okay, where were we? We were taking a moment to ask if any of the staff members had other questions of Mr. Dickey's staff report. Any other questions?
I have one. Mr. Dickey, is there any reason we should question any of the results of this report?
Well, certainly. I mean, that's why we have these meetings and that's why we have a board. If it was totally administratively staff-driven, that was one thing, but this is the process we have is here at the city is staff looks at the code, we interpret the code as best we can, and we provide you a professional recommendation based on our experience and our application of the code. Obviously, the P&Z board are not trained in this, but you have different qualities that you bring to the discussion and the deliberation. So yes, you certainly more than right to question and discuss the findings and conclusions of the staff report. That's why we're here. But what I can say is, in my professional opinion, I think that the statements that I make in the staff report are, to the best of my knowledge and experience, are proper and correct statements. But we certainly can discuss any one of them.
I'm puzzled. Is there anything that's leading you to believe that there's something that needs to be dug at
No,
in the report?
no, I just wanted his opinion of, is there anything we should question?
We always can question any report made by any staff member. It's not only, well, that's the way we do business. You can question. That's why we have meetings. Okay, anybody else have a question for Mr. Dickey? All right. Moving to the next step of the suggestion in the process, let's hear from the applicant. Would you come forward, please, and to the podium and say your name and address, and also introduce who's with you? Did he fill out a speaker's request?
Yeah, it's Mr. DeChristopher. He's on the speaker card. Do you want me to swear in applicant and
Yes.
witnesses?
Would you do that,
The
please?
attorney does not need to be sworn in due to the fact that they're subject to bar rules, but anyone that wants to present any testimony this evening on this item, including Mr. DeChristopher, please raise your right hand and repeat it. Do your friends tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
That means
Duly
anybody
sworn.
back there, stand up and raise your hand if you're going to
Anybody
speak.
else testifying this evening? All right? All right. You firm tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you very much. You're
course.
duly sworn.
All right, it's a formality we go through. Okay, Mr. DeChristopher, go ahead.
My name is Michael Christopher, and I reside at 1765 Rochelle Parkway, Merritt Island. And I'm the owner of the two lots here that I'm trying to split up. And this is my attorney, Kevin Monty. He's a lot better speaker than I am. And we're just here to try to split the lot. I bought it like 4 years ago.
Mhm.
So it's a long process. But if I have any questions.
Briefly, from a procedural standpoint, I haven't been to one of these since I used to sit in Mr. Garganucci's chair 30 years ago.
We know you, Kevin. Kevin is for those who don't know, is a past city attorney of the city of Canaveral.
Is there an allotted time frame, and do we share it, and then do I need to reserve a few minutes perhaps to rebut any testimony?
Well, we'll do it this way. Take a few minutes to make your case.
Yeah, I don't want to make
think
it overly
it's-
formal, but
It's straightforward. And if there's anything you wish to say, Kevin, please do.
well, I think
And-
Mr. Dickey's done a fantastic job presenting it candidly. I'm pleased that there doesn't seem to be any major hiccup to the extent that we can address at least our feelings on that particular item E of the ordinance. We're happy to do so. I did a drive-by. Of course, I'm familiar with the city, not as familiar with all of you on the board, but we feel that we meet all the criteria and have worked, I believe, diligently with the staff, and they've been very responsive. So that being said, unless we have anything else to elaborate, we'll stand by unless you have questions.
Okay, would like you to just take a seat right there close by in case you need to go back to the podium and answer any questions from we'll entertain questions from the audience. Now we're ready to entertain questions and input from our neighbors. And if you have something you'd like to say, please stand up, come forward to the podium. Introduce yourself and tell us where you live.
Good evening. I'm Pat Campbell, 40-year resident of the city of Cape Canaveral.
Do I have a speaker's note for you? I don't, Pat.
I handed it to Mr. Dickey.
You should.
I've got Michael DeChristopher, not to be too blatant. That's okay. We do not apply punishment for mistakes. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. You live on 307 Circle Drive. You're right in there, right close by. We'd like to hear from you. Go ahead.
Well, I'm here to voice my objections and compel you to maintain the texture of our neighborhood and consider my points and other citizen input concerning the splitting of the Christopher lot. I will remind you, I won't take you all the way back to a discussion that happened in 2018, but I will take you back to 2021. You've seen this issue before. This was brought to you on January 27th. Mr. Dickey presented this board with a recommendation of an ordinance change that essentially would have provided amnesty to anyone that had reported a lot split with the county. I'm hoping you can remember that. Through a series of questions and answers among myself, Mr. Dickey, and the city attorney, I found the starting point for the 2021 ordinance change request was in fact the DeChristopher lot split. Statements presented by Mr. Dickey during the January meeting, including characterizing the magnitude of the problem as less than 20, so it's not a widespread issue, and his declaration to make it very clear that it is not about developers coming in and doing this, but innocent parties that through no fault of their own have property they have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on, but can't build on and are in a bad spot. I'm hoping you remember that discussion. Mr. Christopher is a real estate professional that has accomplished around 300 property transactions in Boulevard County and is a named party in a couple of dozen Florida registered corporations, many of which are real estate development and investment related. Mr. DeChristopher is a subject matter expert, not an innocent. Nothing prevented him then or now from building a single family home on that lot. There was never a question about could he build. To characterize the magnitude of the problem as being not widespread dismisses the fact that the properties Mr. Dickey provided as issues are all at the far east end of East Central and Surf and represent 30% of the Surf Drive and East Central neighborhood. So to try and visualize that, I don't know, some of you may have lived in a neighborhood, single-family homes on streets. Take yourself back there and just pretend that at some point a magic wand was waved and every third house turned into two. That's what we're talking about. Mr. Dickey has indicated this issue is complicated because it involves other government agencies. He's referring to the Brevard County Property Appraiser's Office and the Brevard County Clerk of the Court. If there is not a question about authority and the city is the authority, the issue is not complicated by the involvement of other government agencies. Mr. Christopher's lawyer is also introducing a variance request, and I quote, clarification that the 25-foot building setback along the radius of parcel 2 would only apply to either the central frontage or the ridge frontage, but not both. Our ordinance is quite clear. It does apply to both. This emphasizes my position.
Back up and go over that again. Back up and go
Mr.
over that.
DeChristopher's lawyer is introducing a variance request. The words are clarification that the 25-foot building setback along the radius of parcel 2 would only apply to either the central frontage or the Ridgewood Avenue frontage, not both. Our ordinance is clear. It applies to both. This emphasizes my position that the lot split in building 2 homes where one was intended does not fit the character of our neighborhood, and in this case, it literally does not fit. Somebody mentioned small lot. It doesn't fit if you apply the setbacks as the ordinance requires. The application is not compatible and in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood, and the words are the size of existing surrounding lots and development trend. I don't know if you've driven down my street, but there's 2 houses being constructed right now. Single-family homes on large lots. That's the development trend. So this does not fit that. And last, the property information sheet describes two properties and includes the words less the west of 25 feet. I don't understand those words in that property description on both of those properties. It also included a party wall agreement that does not seem to have any bearing or relevance on this application. It's just page count. I don't know why. I'd like that explained. What relevance does it have to this application? Please closely review this lot split application. My concerns, the process used, and the input from other citizens. My hope is our neighborhood can welcome Mr. D. Christopher and his single-family home on a large lot as the rest of our homes are. Thank you for your time.
Well, now, before you go away, got a couple questions. You made a made a comment that the setback was not correct for Ridgewood Avenue, the frontage on Ridgewood. Do you see anything in that aerial of that poster chart?
Survey, lot split survey.
Overhead, do you see anything in that overhead that shows you that there is a problem with the setback measurements? Look up.
Other than in the package, the attorney is requesting clarification that says it only applies to one, not both streets. The ordinance applies to both streets.
And Mr. Chairman, I provided clarification to Mr. Markey indicating that the 25 feet, as I stated earlier this evening, would apply. I agree with Mr. Campbell. So I think
you've replied to that question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And my point is, at the same time, we're talking about compatibility, lot sizes, we're saying, well, I need a variance to be able to do this, so it's not a fit. What do you
No,
want?
wait, there's no variance in question here. There's no variance needed by this request. It has the required distances for setback. Therefore, no variances are needed for setback measurements.
I'm only
I'm only,
reiterating what was in the package that was provided for review.
the package can have questions. And the fact that they may not ask questions of the right nature is fair. They get clarified. So we clarified one about the setback measurements. And it applies to both lots.
No, it applies to both sides of one lot.
Both frontages, yes.
Yeah, it does. Both frontages. 25 feet on the northernmost lot and 25 on the southernmost lot. You see that it goes to 80 on the south side of the lot, but that's not the front of the lot anymore. The front of the lot is the most narrow measurement of the lot, fronting on a street. It's in the code.
I can assure you I've read the code.
Yeah, okay, we're in violent agreement.
I'm not sure about that.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
so this is what I was relaying talking about earlier, and I wasn't projecting myself very clearly. I think that we were told that for this meeting, we're just gonna vote on the lot split. But I think your concern is knowing that they want to come back in the future for the variance process on the both frontages. Is that correct, what you're saying?
I'm concerned that as I read the application, all of it, one of the documents called for asking you, this council, this board, to consider a variance of that setback, to clarify. It's in the paper that was submitted.
Okay, we have no variance application in front of us.
Understand.
So we are not considering a variance application at this time. If they do come forward, and you're entitled to come forward with any application you wish at any time, then we will apply the code and we will consider it at that time. okay, you need to know.
And then I had another question about another document that was in there that talked about, when it's describing the lots, it referenced less 25 feet west. I didn't understand that. So I'm sure the attorney can help with that.
Did you get clarification? Was there a violation of the code ordinance? Was there a violation of the ordinance?
Or is all we're talking about is violating the ordinance, or are we talking about the package as a whole that's been presented to you to review and make a decision from? The description of the lot includes words that I don't understand.
We're going to make a decision on the entire package as submitted with clarifications and facts as they come forward.
And then as they describe the request for the lot split, there is a document in there that describes the lots that has words in it I understand. I'd just like to have that explained while they're here.
Okay, what is it you'd like to have explained? Just tell us
What does-
again.
When it's describing the lot, it talks about the north 75 feet, and it talks about less the west 25 feet. I don't know what that means.
Okay. Who in the room has an explanation? David, do you have, Kevin, please stand up and talk.
It's part of the legal description that was created when these lots were split by Mr. Pinziak in the 1980s. So it used to be lot 21 of the plat. Then it became part of lot 21, less than except 25 feet. He created his attempt to create what you see before you today back in the early 80s. That's all. There's no smoke and mirrors. That's just a surveyor going out there, and the surveyor was Ed Mills, whom I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And he went out there and shot a range and created that legal description, and that's what Mr. Pinziak did.
Which 25 feet is he talking about on the overhead?
It's not on the overhead, it's on the legal description. I can give you OR book and pages. Is it?
Original plan, the lot was 150
Wait,
feet.
I want to get us in the right. What are we looking at here, Pat? Take us to the original one we had up.
I'm sorry, I asked Patty to put up, go back to the survey, please. Whoops, wrong way. There you go.
That's it.
The original platted lot back in the 70s from Silvesco. This one particular lot is lot number 21. So Mr. Pinziak did, he went back, I did a lot of research on this, and he created the two lots. When he did that, he took out the west 25 feet of what was platted back then
Okay.
to create the lot, have an alleyway.
Because didn't he own a different lot?
Yeah, he owns all of them. He still owns all of them.
Well, okay. Having heard that, did we arrive at the correct set of measurements for lots? Okay,
25 feet has nothing to do with what we're doing.
that's,
It's just
that's,
in the legal description.
it's in the past.
And the party wall agreement, that was something that was in a different subdivision. And it wasn't, when it was mentioned, that's nothing to do with.
That is correct. When we updated the title search report, which the staff inquired about what are we going to do about this party wall being called out, we contacted the title company and said, it doesn't appear that this party wall touches or affects this lot. They agreed, and that's in the updated title search report. There's no mention of a party wall in the updated title search report.
Okay. Well, the main thing you got to keep your eye on is the ball. And the ball is, these are the lot that came out, these are the two lots that came out of all that. And they are measured correctly and they are described correctly.
And as far as the terminology about the variance request, I respect that Mr. Campbell's read the code. He's probably familiar that is indeed a term of art. It's not just plain English in the context of zoning and land use. And so I was not asking for a variance. I was simply interpreting the lot split ordinance, and don't get if you don't ask, it said you can grant the lot split with conditions. So I simply asked if that could be an additional condition. I've been told no, so no problem. Mr. DeCrisco will go through that process if he so chooses. I was not trying to do any
Yeah.
round.
We understand, and I just stated, there is no variance request in front of us.
Yep.
And if there is, we will consider it at a later time at a different, as a different subject.
Very good. As far as the rest, I mean, I don't know if you have some comments.
Just have one more comment. I think Mr. Campbell had mentioned that he would like it to stay just one lot and not split it up because he feels that it should be one single-family home. But I think what he fails to realize, and Mr. Dickey can tell you this, that the original plat, it was R2 zoning, it was multifamily. It was never intended to be one lot for a single-family home. And then the city came in and administratively rezoned it to R1, which put the burden on that corner lot of having two double frontages. Because in R2 zoning, your side, the frontage on Central would only be 15 feet, just like every other corner lot going down Ridgewood Avenue. It's 25 feet in the front, 15 on the side, because they're all R2. But this got rezoned from R2 to R1, which created that issue with having very small building out there. But it was always intended to be multifamily, not single, until the zoning changed.
Okay, so all the area we're looking at here is R1, less the Oceanwood view you see there at the top. That's a whole separate townhouse subdivision. But everything below that solid black line is R1. Am I right?
Yeah, I believe R1 goes down to Surf Drive,
Yeah,
and then south of that is R2.
okay. Okay. I think we've about beat that horse to death unless you want to add anything else, Pat.
I would just like to say that the city made a firm statement when they transitioned it from R2 to R1, which was to preserve the character of residential communities, one lot, one house. It was done for a reason, regardless of what it was in the past.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And is there anybody else that'd like to come forward and make input? It's okay, we won't beat you up. We're your neighbors. As I've said more than one speech. We're approximately 2 square miles of city. We are literally governed by our neighbors. We elect our neighbors as our government. So we're all neighbors here. Come forward, please. Say who you are and where you live.
My name's Susan Miller. I live in Canaveral, the other side of Oceanwood. And when I bought over there, I mean, I knew it was a townhouse. I knew Oceanwood is there, and that's all townhouses. But I also knew all the way down East Central and down through this is going to be built, they were houses and they were big lots. I was totally aware of it. I'm sure when this lot was bought, you knew what it was. Whenever y'all own homes, I do. Y'all do your due diligence, don't you?
We're
You
listening.
understand what you are buying. You understand what is allowed, what is not allowed. Nobody spends hundreds of thousands of dollars and they don't do the due diligence. I feel like this was bought in 18 with the sole intention of going forward and sitting. You can't tell me that you spent all this money and you didn't do your homework.
Well, let's
So,
talk
but
about that.
You look at this, and it is with the neighborhood. It is with the neighborhood. I walk down that street every day. Every day we take a walk down there, and what is being proposed is not with the neighborhood. I don't care what you see or how it looks on a map. You walk down there, and it's open, it's nice, it's pretty, it's quiet. You start doing this, and we're gonna lose all that. We're gonna lose the Cape Canaveral, the small town feeling. You're gonna start getting people in there, Mr. Christopher, to split lots. And this is just a start. You think it's gonna stop here? No, it won't. This is a nice neighborhood, and this is the start of destroying it. I think it's wrong. I don't think any of you should vote for it. It shouldn't have. He knew what he was buying when he bought it. That's all I have to say. I hope you vote against it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come forward, please. Well, okay. We'll swear you in and let you speak anyway.
Be firm, tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Okay, just complete a form when you're through speaking. Thank you very much, ma'am.
I'm a nervous speaker, but I just wanted to make a point. My name is Linda Zates, and I live in Ocean Woods. And I love Surf Drive, and I love Central. I go up and down it all the time. The residents bought those lots and built those beautiful homes with the understanding that it was going to stay that way. They spent a lot of money and time to build houses on big lots so they can live a good life. And you're not taking them into account, I don't think.
And which lots are you referring to? You've got an aerial up there, just say which ones you're talking about. Which lots?
I'm saying that Surf Drive and Central Avenue are large lots with single-family homes. And I think you need to take into account those people who work hard and spend thousands of dollars to keep their property values and lives intact. So I think this is the beginning of a slide in the wrong direction. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anybody else? Did you fill out a card?
Yes, sir, I did.
Which one are you?
Brian Hurst. Live in Canaveral.
Okay, Brian, go ahead.
I've lived in Florida my whole life. My grandfather worked on the Canaveral Trail with walking dread when he built it. My dad worked for Deltona when they developed Marco Island. I worked in Naples in developing construction. I've been in Florida my whole life. I've seen what construction has done. We moved here to Cape Canaveral. This is a beautiful little town. I think it should stay a beautiful little town. I love walking. Me and my wife, we walk to the beach every morning. I'm retired. And it's so peaceful. I love getting up early in the morning and walking and not seeing a bunch of traffic and a bunch of people honking horns, trying to run me over, anything. I love this place. I've seen what developers and greed has done to this state. I just hope you guys take that into consideration too. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, now we're to the discussion period of the board. And we'll ask if, let's see, I've got one more. Pat Campbell, did Pat Campbell speak? Right. I don't memorize all the faces and names together. Okay, very good. I didn't want to miss anybody. Now we're to discussion period. And then I'll go to the left side of the board again. And ask Eugene, do you have you heard or seen anything that you'd like to ask about or clarify?
No, I haven't. Sometimes changes hurt. I think that he's in compliance with his application. I still don't see anything. I don't see anything wrong.
Okay, moving over to Stephen, are you, you wish to ask anything or add anything?
No questions, but I think the genie was let out of the bottle when the county allowed this to happen. And the county did what they did. And the fact that there's no communication between what takes place at the assessor's office and the city as well. It's just, it's not right. But I don't see the reason to not approve something like this.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Dr. Miller, do you have anything?
I don't live very far from there, so I am familiar with it a lot. I understand everyone's concerned with that. And I can see where they're coming from. But from a board point of view, I mean, if it meets the criteria, it meets the criteria.
Yeah, he meets the law. He meets the letter of the law. The only wiggle room you've got in the letter of the law is this thing called compatibility and harmony with surrounding neighborhood. You get to make a decision on that. That's where you get to use your feeling and your training and your input. The rest of it is pretty cut and dry. It either meets the law or it doesn't. All right, off to the next person, that'll be John Prime.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I appreciate everybody that wanted to express their feelings and opinions tonight, and certainly we all have those. And personally, if it were my choice, I would say, let's leave the lots be lots. But that's not the charge of the Planning and Zoning Board. Our charge is to take the facts and evaluate them and then make recommendations based on that. And emotions and feelings are supposed to be aside from that. And so for that reason, I'm compelled to say that I think that everything about this proposal is compatible and compliant, and there's no reason not to approve it.
Okay, thank you. And next to Susan Denny, do you have any input, please?
Well, I agree that as it's plotted out, it does meet all of the rules and regulations, and it is something we can do, and I do appreciate the emotions. I mean, I like to have a big lot, I like to have a lot of space too, but as was stated earlier, I mean, if it follows the letter of the law, it follows the letter of the law. Okay.
How about you, Nathan?
Well, I have to agree with what's been said. It meets the criteria. It is a beautiful area. I walk by it every day. I wish it was easy and you wanted to make it R2. Because then I would be very happy saying that it's going to be a one-family home. And unless something comes up and we have to revisit it again, or someone does with the variance issue, I think I have to approve it.
Okay, I have no, I've heard and made my opinions in the discussion tonight, and I think I said all I need to say. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve, to recommend approval of this lot split or disapproval. Approval or disapproval. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion that we provide a recommendation for approval of the lot split as stated on the proposal.
May I have a second?
I second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Call the roll, Pat,
Mr. Russell,
or
I'm sorry,
I recommend approval.
you recommend approval, okay. Mr. Price, Ms. Denny,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlecore,
For the motion,
Mr. Ford,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud,
For the
and
motion.
Dr. Miller.
For the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends that item on the agenda. We move next, we invite you to stay, and we appreciate you coming and speaking on the matter. All right, the next item on the agenda is the written number 2, the ordinance of the city council and city of Cape Canaveral amending the city's sign code relating to feather sign. And have a report on that. David, Mr. Dickey, would you take us through that, please?
I certainly will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. This is an item that we've been discussing for a few months now. This originally came up due to COVID. Back in the COVID days, I shouldn't say back in the COVID days, I'm not sure we're out of them yet. Back when we had an emergency order in place, the city wanted to make some allowances for that on our local businesses and property owners. As a result, the city council at the time passed a emergency order, and through resolution number 2021-06, and it created certain provisions. And one of them was to temporarily, what's the word I'm looking for?
Allow temporary use.
There you go, of feather flags as signage. And when the emergency order went away, the council rescinded all of those. However, the council decided that, you know what, the economy's tough, it's still hard out there. Let's allow temporary, on a temporary basis, feather flags until the Planning and Zoning Board can bring back a recommendation to us on what should the city do long-term with respect to feather flags. We brought this to the P&Z board, when did we do that? At the, I think it's about a couple of months ago, we brought that. And we had some preliminary discussions about that. We didn't really have any specific direction from the P&Z board except for that you wanted to consider something. We talked about several scenarios on what an ordinance could look like. So based on that direction, our city attorney has prepared 3 different ordinances that are in your packet. And I'm going to just give a very quick summary of the 3. Essentially, the first is option 1. I'm on page 2 now. Option 1 allows feather flags just like any other sign that we allow in the city. It creates a new definition and removes it from the banner definition. Currently, feather flags are considered banners, temporary signs. Okay, so option 1 would allow that to. Option 1 would allow them all the time in C1, C2, and M1, 3 of our different zoning districts, our commercial and industrial zoning districts. So treat them just like other signage. Option 2, and we can get into this a little bit more as we go through the packet. Option 2 would allow feather flags as a temporary on-premise sign.
I'm stopping right there.
Okay.
Option 2 is what we had before COVID.
That's correct.
We had a provision to use feather flags for specific events.
Correct.
For certain occasions, and then after that it was over, and they went away, and we
Correct.
wait for the next occasion.
Right. Before COVID, we allowed feather flags 30 days per calendar year. That was how we used to handle feather flags. And that is essentially what we are doing again in option 2. Okay? Option 1, allow them just like all the time. Option 2, allow them 30 days per calendar year. And then option 3 is prohibit them completely. No more feather flags. There was some discussion at last time the P&Z board considered this item about do we really want them? And so option 3 is there if the board decides to completely prohibit them.
Yeah, option 3 kind of says you can't have them. And that's in abeyance to a lot of work that got done where all the signage ordinance was scrubbed What an ordeal. That was one of the worst parts of my sojourn in this job. It's hard to do signs, and it's hard to do freedom of expression. You're tromping on constitutional rights. You got to be very careful. So anyway, we did that. We went by and we scrubbed it and came up with a sign ordinance that we had. Then we allowed banners and feather signs on a temporary basis, and that seemed to work. Along came COVID, merchants came back, said we could use a little break here or something extra to help us out through this period. We did that. We allowed feather signs pretty much unlimited, but we did have some regulations that were supposed to be taken in at night. That didn't happen, and that got overlooked. But that's water under the bridge. So we got three options in front of us. You have anything else to add, Dave?
Yeah, just briefly, the two options, option one, which would propose to allow feather flags just like regular signs, creates a new category of feather signs. I'm on page 4 of 6 in option one ordinance. And then there's a number of requirements that are established, such as you're only allowed one feather flag every 150 feet. It can only be so tall. I think it's 8 feet. It can only be 12 square feet in size. So there's certain criteria that would have to be met under option 1 and 2. Now, option 3 bans them completely. So obviously there's no requirements associated with option 3. But I just wanted to make the point that to the board that option 1 and 2 do come along with certain requirements as far as size, number of, location. So anyways, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we're not making a specific recommendation on which option. We're just asking for input.
We asked you last night to come back with recommendations because it was a thorny issue. On the one side, if you allow them like regular signs and you have the incentive for the merchant not to invest in a nice permanent sign that's attractive, you can get on the worst case, you can get a proliferation of forest or feather signs throughout the town. And that's what you got. You got a town that looks like feather signs, which would be worst case. The temporary on premises is the compromise. It worked pretty well before COVID. And then we came along and opened the gates. Said, go ahead, use them as you needed. Then what happens, nobody replaced them. They didn't take them in. They look bad. A lot of them do look bad. And I'm not giving you an opinion. I'm just giving you an observance. And then the third option is to prohibit them outright. So there you have it. You have a chance tonight to make a recommendation and pick one. Or add a fourth option if you can think up a better one. So here we are. We're in discussion now. Do you have any more questions for Mr. Dickey? Okay, hearing none. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay. Now we go to the panel, and we'll go down to Eugene. Do you have any questions or input or recommendations?
I'm somewhat torn with the feathered flags. I use them, and I see them, and some of them they look bad. If they're not taken care of by the business owner, they look bad. I don't know if we could have some type of code where, or if someone sees a bad or tattered sign or feathered flag to, inform the owner or anything like that. So as a business owner that uses feathered flags, I would either we allow them or just totally prohibit them, and then I would have to come up with something else, and the other business owners that use them would have to come up with something else besides feathered flag.
So you could have the option of a regular flag, a regular sign.
Well, if your office sits off the road and cars are coming down 528, let's say you have a restaurant and you have breakfast people really can't see the sign. They'll look at the feather flag before they would look at the sign because it's right there at eye level. That's the only downfall with that, but some of them do look bad. I mean, I have to agree with the last conversation we had about this. Some of them do look bad and the owners don't take care of them. Maybe if they are prohibited, you know, the business owners will come in and speak up like I have about it. But right now, I'm either we allow it or we don't, and nothing in between, because for me, I don't want to have to worry about what the rules are temporarily for a feather flag, because I'll forget, and then I may be fined or whatever you know, happens when, you know, if they see a flag that's up for a month and it shouldn't be. So I would rather either do it or not do it. And if not, I have to come up with something else.
Well, might I suggest, when you say do it or not do it,
Well, option one or option
you
three.
have option two, you can use the temporary on-premise sign, but you could still choose to do it or not do it because you don't want to be bothered with the remembrance of upkeep and maintenance. You can make that choice.
Well, who's going to know whether or not I'm within the guidelines or not within the guidelines? That's where the issue comes in. Say I have an event and, you know, I have the feathered flag, which is in compliance, and then I leave it there because I forget for 30 days and someone comes by and say, your flag has been up for too long, and then I get a fine or something. So I just rather not have the problem. I'd rather not have it as opposed to having to worry about it. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Okay. Steve?
Dave, can you happen to have a list, a count of violations that have been issued on feather flags? You have a tally on that?
I don't have it at my fingertips, but we could run something like that. But it will in general say that we have not been aggressively enforcing this just because of the kind of carryover of all we get into this in the first place, because of the difficult economy and wanting the businesses to be able to have that ability to use this. So we have not been aggressively enforcing it, but once it becomes an ordinance via this process, we will.
So sitting here during the meeting, I was going through Google Maps, and I was able to locate at least 10 feather flags on Google Earth reported on there. Personally, I don't care for the feather flags. So I would prefer not to see them, but this is not about what I want. I listened to Eugene the last time that we talked about this, and I see his point about having them. I understand how his business is set back, and plain and simple, they do attract attention. It's just, they need to be maintained and not become in disrepair and sit out there day and night. So I'm compelled to allow the business owners to use them.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Miller?
I think option one is overkill, leaving them up all the time. In my opinion, they're supposed to get your attention. And if something is there 365 days a year, you're going to look right through it. And I agree with you, there are several in the city that do not look good. But I do see that there are times when businesses would want to use it to attract attention. And then if business owners like Eugene say, I don't want to use it at all because I don't want to have to keep track of all the regulations, that's a choice. But I'm willing to go for them part-time. They're not full-time.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Mr. Prass?
Well, you know, flags, you're right. You're absolutely right. Flags have been one of the most difficult things we've had to talk about. You know, we kind of raised that moratorium on feather flags during the COVID time and left it up to the individual business owners to maintain and police that. And they ignored almost everything that was put in front of them in terms of taking down the signs every day, only being up during business hours, making them compliant and maintaining them. That being said, I also think that business owners should have the right to attract customers or business to the best of their ability. Personally, I don't like feather flags, and I know how they can be abused. But I do see an application for feather flags, and not on a full-time basis. In my opinion, if a business owner is truly sincere and trying to make a thriving business out of what they have, they'll find whatever means are necessary through other types of advertising to promote the business. So I guess my vote would be for option 2, allow feather flags on a temporary on-premise, temporary basis on-premise signs, with the caveat that, there's a thing for compliance, size, and that kind of thing set back. And then also, whether or not they're going to take the signs in every day and only be out during business hours. And then talk about what would be acceptable in terms of how the signs look. And then once you've got all that, then we have to figure out how we're going to police that. And I mean, that's the hardest part. So I guess, my initial reaction is if we're going to do anything with feather flags, let's go back to where we were and allow them on a temporary basis.
Okay, John, thank you. And takes us down to Susan.
I'm option 2 for the temporary, and for some of the reasons that are stated already. But also, when you read the revisioning report, that it said that one of the comments was, quit catering to the tourists, make sure you have the residents' thoughts in mind. So to me, feather flags are really somebody who's not a resident, right? And it's late at night and you see these things flapping. Well, it shouldn't be late at night, right? Or whatever, for doing it. And I don't want to be just flags all over the place. I don't think it looks good. I think that the board ahead of us went through all of this discussion before, allowing the temporary part of it all. We cleaned up the words, so it's not with the banners anymore. That came out of it. So I'm a solid option 2.
Nope. Okay. Nancy?
I'm option 2 also. I've been driving around taking notice of them, and one thing I have noticed is there's fewer of them. There was a lot more, and I don't know why, and they seem to be in better repair. And I think we should allow people to put things out for a sale or for something like that. I don't think, I have no expectation anyone's going to take it in at night. They're not going to do it. I don't think we have the manpower to police that. But if they're at least well maintained, and they're out for a specific purpose, I think we should give the business folks an opportunity to use them in that. So option 2 does that. If you choose not to, you don't have to.
Well, I'm of the opinion that option 2 is good. From that, option 3 is draconian. And we've tried option 1 through COVID, and we see the result. And it looks like if you go option 1, you set aside all the work and cleanup and signage discussion and regulation to get signs cleaned up and posted and built correctly and according to the right regulations, we had that going before COVID. Well, fine. We did what we had to do for the time. I believe that our job is not to punish the agent, but to help them make a living. I think the temporary on-premise sign does that. And if you choose to use it, fine. If you choose not to use it, fine. Just do whatever your business needs. So I like option 2. Now, we're ready for a motion. And rather than ask you to vote 1, 2, 3, let's have a little discussion about that. We can vote 1, 2, 3 and stop the vote and see who gets the most votes.
Mr.
Or-
Chairman,
Go ahead, John.
can I just make a recommendation?
Of course.
Let's make a proposal for an option, let people vote on that. If it goes down, then we'll go on to the next.
Okay, very good. That's why I enjoy working with smart people. So could I have a motion, please?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt option number 2 for the feather flag ordinance.
We recommend option.
Recommend, yeah.
Okay,
Michael Miller and I second that motion.
thank you. Call the roll, Pat.
Mr. Russell,
I am for recommending option 2.
Mr. Price,
For the motion.
Ms. Denny,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlecore. For the motion. Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud,
For the motion.
Mr. Thorpe.
Not for the motion.
And we respect that. All right, that completes that agenda item. Let me get back on the roadmap here for agenda management. We're now down to item 3. Consideration recommendation to the city council of a preliminary and final plat approval for 3 residential lots at Poinsettia Place. It's located on Jackson Avenue. Okay, we have the aerial up over on the overhead. You can see where it's located. It's on Jefferson, I said Jackson, I meant Jefferson Avenue. And, David, take us through the.
Yes, thank you,
Great.
Mr. Chairman. I'll try to make this as brief as possible. The applicant is requested preliminary and final plat approval for Poinsettia Place, which is a 3-lot subdivision. Again, this is, as it's undeveloped, we don't have specific addresses on these parcels yet, but is it in the 100 block of Jefferson Avenue. The plat is consistent with the city zoning code as far as lot sizes and access and egress and those type of standards. We did go through it and look for infrastructure capacity, specifically water and sewer and roads. And those are all have the capacity to accommodate the project. We also looked at compatibility, much like we did on the first, the previous case. We looked at compatibility and consistency, and these will be single-family homes on good-sized lots for this specific area. So certainly it is an area. Patty, can you go back to the aerial, please? I'm sorry to keep having you back and forth. You can see from the aerial that we again have a mixed bag here, if I can use that term. We've got townhouses immediately to the north. We've got commercial to the west along North Atlantic. We've got some very small lots immediately to the south. I'm not sure how those were created. I have some questions as to those little lots right there, but that's not part of our conversation tonight.
The only magic to a plat, preliminary plat, is make sure you got the dimensions right.
Right.
And you got the property defined correctly.
Correct. And
they're not asking for anything else. They're not going to go for that type of building. They're not going to go for, they're not even going for individual lot size inside. If they do, that's another
whole other process.
thing that we'll process separately. So all you're looking for is an identification of the parcel and make sure the dimensions are right. And that's just about all you do. With
It's a very technical review. If you look towards the end of the first page, you can see that starting with 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes on to the second page, 5 through 10. These are all criteria that we need to look at when we're considering approval of a plat, which we did. And also, the last thing, important thing I want to point out is Florida law requires a third-party surveyor to review these plats. And it's kind of like another set of eyes looking at that to make sure that the plats are consistent with Florida statute. Florida statute has certain requirements that have to be on a plat. And so
That was done?
that was done, and we got signed. I think Mike did this one, didn't he? Yeah, Mike is, I'll just say, very thorough with his reviews. And he certainly looks out for the best interests of the city. And this particular plat does meet all of those requirements, state requirements. It does meet city requirements. And for that reason, we are requesting or recommending that the board recommend approval to the council on this particular plat, final plat request. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Richards? All right, going left down to Eugene, do you have any comments, input?
No, I do not.
Okay. Stephen?
None.
Okay. Mike?
No.
Okay. Mr. Pratt?
No, put together all the questions or anything? No further questions?
Okay, how about you? Okay, me either. So the chairman has no questions. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve or disapprove this plat.
Michael Miller and I suggest that we approve the motion to divide it up.
Thank you.
Stephen Stroud seconds the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of recommending the plat approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So that's unanimous. That speeded it up a little bit, Pat. We just called the roll for you. All right. Get the road map back out. That. Site plan approval for Hyatt Place Hotel on Asteroid Boulevard. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this request is for site plan approval for a Hyatt Place Hotel at 9009 Astronaut. The parcel is within as many of, I think, as all of our other hotels that we've looked at over the last few years. This is in what's considered our A1A Economic Opportunity Overlay District, which has a specific set of requirements that need to be met. The application does include a site plan showing a 6-story hotel on a overall 7.17 acre parcel. Now, you can see here from the aerial that's up in front of you that the area in red is what I'm referring to as the project area. The overall site, which includes the Country Inn and Suites to the west of the project area, is 7.17 acres. The project area is 2.79 acres, or almost 3 acres. The proposed hotel is a 154-room Country Inn and Suite hotel. Actually, that's not Country Inn and Suite hotel. It is a Hyatt Place hotel. Building footprint is 15,000 square feet. It does meet all of the dimensional requirements of the C1 and overlay district. That's something we look for when they're coming in for site plan approval to make sure they meet all of our, this is a very, very technical review. We're looking at things such as water connections and fire hydrants and parking space standards and utility connections, and making sure all of those specs meet the minimum City of Cape Canaveral requirements, which I can say it does.
Did we get an input from the city engineering on that?
We did. I will get, I mean, if you'd like, we can skip over a number of sections.
Well, no, I don't need to steal your thunder here.
I will get to that, Mr. Chairman.
Keep going.
All right, thank you. Again, as we move down page 1, the project is consistent with all of our landscaping requirements, consistent with all of our parking requirements, providing 163 parking spaces, which is what's required for this size of a project. even that once this project is, I'll say, carved out of the Country Inn and Suites property, there will be enough spaces left at the Country Inn and Suites property, so there'll be adequate parking for both hotels post-construction of this second one. At the top of page 2, a traffic analysis was completed for this project. We require a traffic analysis for all of our, I'll call them major projects. And I won't get into all the specifics. I think the important thing to remember is that there's 2 things we're looking for when we do a traffic analysis. The first one is that what's called the level of service will not be negatively degraded, which means it's not going to snarl up traffic, if you want to put it in kind of basic terms. And the second thing that we look for is, are there any physical improvements that needed to be made, geometric improvements and other engineering lingo. Basically what that means is, do we need to put XL, decel lanes in? Do we have to put additional turn lanes in on either Astronaut or the Project Drive coming into Astronaut? So, and the answer is no to both of those questions. No, it's not going to snarl up traffic and degrade our level of service. And no, it does not need any geometric improvements. Interestingly enough, I'm kind of a numbers guy. I'm fascinated by it. This project will generate, at build-out, a little over 1,200 trips per day. And that includes 87. And that's the important number we look for. We always look for the PM peak hour, which means what's the tip of the iceberg? What's the worst point that this is going to be? And it is a PM peak hour of 87 trips in an hour. That'll be the worst case scenario every day, 87 trips. So it's about a little over 1 a minute. Anyways, if you're into traffic engineering, that could be of interest. Also, the staff report goes through the standards that are established in the EOOD, our overlay district, specifically building orientation, on-site circulation, surface parking, things like that. And the project is consistent with those. Water is going to be provided by the city of Cocoa. Cape Canaveral is the water provider. Again, all of those specific connections and details and engineering requirements are all in your packet on C-105. They have been reviewed by the city engineer, who did sign off on the project. I think actually Evan gave you a date of when that happened. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. On June 14th, the city engineer approved the application as amended. There were a few back and forth between the applicant, between Mike and the city engineer to just nail down a few things. So there was a little bit of discussion, but we got to where we needed to be, and that's why it's here in front of you. In conclusion, I will say that the Community Appearance Board did consider this project, and the reason they consider a project, again, is twofold. One is all new commercial development has to go in front of our Community Appearance Board to make sure it's consistent with design and architectural standards of the overlay district. And the second thing that they do in certain cases is approve projects that exceed our 45-foot height cap in C1. Within the overlay district, you can go higher than that with approval of the Community Appearance Board, up to 65 feet. And that's the case here. So the Community Appearance Board approved them going to 65 feet, 6 stories. And I typically don't add this information, but I just thought it may be of interest. It's kind of the financial numbers behind these projects. You may or may not be interested in it. Right? And I'm specific to say that it's not a criteria that is applicable to site plan review. I don't want the board to get caught up in that. But it's just interesting what monies the project like this will generate. And the final thing I would like to say is that we recommend site plan approval to the Planning and Zoning Board. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. If there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer.
John Press? Yeah, Dave, I know that it's written in there, and I just want to hear it from you. Consideration of infrastructure, sewage and water, You know, we got a lot of development going on right there. Can we keep up?
That's a good question, and it's something we as a staff are monitoring very carefully. Right now, the city wastewater plant is permitted for roughly 1.8 million gallons a day of sewer treatment capacity. We're running at about 1.1 to 1.2 a day right now. So we've got, let's just say, 600,000 gallons of effluent a day capacity. Now, we do have a number of projects that are either in the books or second or third phases that we need to keep in mind too, that are going to start nibbling away at that 600,000 gallon capacity that we have on the books, so to speak. You know, a project like this, I don't recall if I threw that number in there or not. I want to say that a project like this uses around, I may not have, I'm going to say I think it's around 25,000 gallons a day, a hotel. So it's not as much as you would think, but it's a good question, and we watch it very carefully.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you think of, I know you didn't ask, but I'm going to kind of go off here a little bit. We really don't have a lot of space right now at our existing wastewater treatment plant to expand. So we have to be very judicious with that capacity that we have.
And then water supply, I know we're not supplying the water, but
As far as I know, to the best of my knowledge, Coco has, Anthony might be able to answer that question better than I. He's the city attorney for Coco, but I'm not aware of any issues as far as capacity with the city of Coco water distribution system.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, anybody else have a question?
I'm just curious, besides, do you know any idea when they want to build, when they want to do this?
I've been talking with these folks for probably about 5 years. I think that, well, and you know what? The applicant's representative is here. He might be able to shed some light on that, but I think they're wanting to move this forward fairly quickly, but I'll defer to Mike Allen.
I have one more question before Mr. Allen speaks. Do you have any experience with with this particular developer? I know that we've had, you know, places go up and we've had the same developer for multiple hotels. Okay, do you have any experience with this developer?
I personally don't. Anthony may, or Mr. Allen might. I do know that, I believe it's the same developer that developed the Country Inn and Suites. And so I don't know if that would be something Mike would need to confirm, but, okay. So, I think at least my belief is that they've been a good corporate neighbor in Cape Canaveral.
Anything else, Mike?
Oh. Mike Allen, Allen Engineering, representing the ownership group for the Hyatt Place, and it is the same ownership group that owns and operates the Country Inn and Suites. Their intent is to own and operate both hotels. Should something happen in the future, they have been designed that, you know, each parcel could stand on their own, but that's not the intent right now.
Was that particular owner group, were they the ones that actually built the Country Inn and Suites, or did they purchase it from somebody else?
I believe they built it.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, do you have any idea the timetable on construction?
They are pushing me as fast as I can go. So they are anxious to get moving. So we did go to the Community Appearance Board, I think it was in September of 2020. We got approved. COVID, we shut it down for a little bit. We went to start it back up. Unfortunately, we had missed that 1-year window frame of the Community Appearance Board approval. So we had to go back through the Community Appearance Board process. And now we are full steam ahead. And I think the architectural group is quickly finishing their plans and ready to submit as soon as we can get approval from you guys.
Yeah, and speaking of moving forward, after site plan approval, I'm not, depending on what the board does here this evening, should you recommend approval, it would go to me. I have final, say, approval responsibility for site plans. So I could get that approved tomorrow. And then the next step for this group would be to submit for building plans. So they can move forward pretty quickly on the project.
Mr. Price, can I answer your earlier question about capacities? I mean, one of the processes that we go through is approval, is concurrency. So we have to submit to the city to tell them that, yes, we have capacity to handle your development. We have to do the same with the city of Cocoa and the water. So as part of the approval process through Mr. Dickey's office is, getting verification from the surrounding utilities that there are enough utilities to provide service to this production.
Yeah, and it includes water, sewer, roads, solid waste. There's a stormwater review. City engineer does a stormwater review to make sure that's all copacetic. And there's a few others that I'm missing. Anyways, but each project is thoroughly vetted as far as capacity of public infrastructure.
Okay, all levels of service have been checked. That's the most important criteria. Anything else? We were asking questions to the staff, but our next rotation is just to come by and ask individuals in the board if they have anything else. Stand by on the podium there, Mike, and we'll just do it this way. Down with you, Eugene. Anything?
No.
Okay. How about you, Steve?
I just want to make a comment, as somebody who looks at civil plans and works on civil plans every day. I see that the infrastructure was well laid out for this project. I could see the water, sanitary, everything is in place for this. So this was well planned out, well thought out. Looks like they're not going to be opening up any city roads or doing anything like that. Sanitary lines, the water, everything, it's all right there on the site and laid out and ready to go.
I won't take credit for that. The previous engineer for the Country Inn Suites had it laid out pretty well for us. So
Yeah.
we're just tying into them.
This is easy.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that.
No further comment.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, Dr. Miller?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, John Powell?
No additional comments or questions?
I think that everything's, looks really good. My only concern is in the future, like I drove to this place the other day, and I know that the traffic report says everything is fine. So I'm not a traffic engineer. That's wonderful, but boy, those cars coming over that overpass are coming really, really fast. And I think it's gonna be dangerous, anybody trying to make a left-hand turn out of that. What more so. I would never do a left-hand turn out of there.
Well, I think DOT is doing their best to try to prohibit a left-hand turn out of there.
Yeah.
You all may have a say in that with their future development along A1A, but we have been working as part of our permitting process with DOT to accommodate their future developments, which would prohibit a left-hand turn.
Everything looks good.
And I will say that the ownership group too does have concerns about the speed coming over the overpass, and although it's not required, they have asked us to lengthen the right-hand turn lane into the site, so that's part of our DOT permitting process as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to make that point to the board is that this project does have to get a permit from FDOT. So they review it for their specific requirements as well. So they're jumping through hoops.
Dave, can I? At one point, when we were talking about the expansion of that racetrack, there was talk about a service road going in there. Is there still discussion about a service road? Okay.
It'd be nice.
You understand why I'm asking the question? You
Yeah.
get people over to
Yeah.
Central.
You could run, I mean, theoretically, if we would have pre-planned this, you could have stayed off Astronaut and run all the way from this site all the way down to Central.
Yeah.
Which would be wonderful. That cat is long gone, or that something's out of the barn or something or other.
Horse. Okay. I don't have any either. Well, I do have a comment. It's well done. The site work is well done, as usual, from Allen Engineering, and we appreciate that. Well, let's see. That brings us to pre-ordinance.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we approve the site, that we recommend approval of the site plan for the Hyatt Place.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I second that.
Thanks for keeping me in the straight and narrow, guys. And have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please,
Mr. Russell,
for the motion?
Mr. Price,
For the motion.
Ms. Denny,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlecore, Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud,
For the motion.
Mr. Thorpe.
For the motion.
See, I was trying to get your meeting moved along. All
Thank
right.
you all very much.
All right, now we're down to the item on the agenda. It's the ordinance amending the tree protection ordinance, providing amendments to comply with state. Yeah, what drives this? This is different from something we've had before. But give us your report, David.
Well, this is the conforming amendments for, do we have an extra copy of that? What happened was, Anthony, when we sent the report out, it was minus this particular item. So we
I think I sent it to you.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but essentially, you're right, Mr. Chairman. This is this ordinance request is really driven as a result of some changes made by the Florida legislature. So I think we can categorize this ordinance as a conforming amendments so that our city tree ordinance is consistent with Florida law, basically.
Looks to me like an overlay of bureaucracy, an extra layer. Somebody in the legislature got upset about something and introduced an amendment, and there we have it.
Well, they've been playing with trees. The legislature has been playing with trees the last few years. If you recall, I think it was, Anthony, you might want to jump in here. But a few years ago, the legislature weighed in on the issue of what a city can do with respect to regulating the removal of trees on, I think specifically residential property.
I thought we had a pretty strict ordinance.
The city does have a tree protection ordinance. It's been on the books for some time. You recall a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, the Florida legislature adopted what they call as a preemption of local home rule. The state stepped in and said that the cities are preempted from prohibiting the removal of trees on residential property. And if a property owner were to provide a certification from an arborist or a licensed landscape architect, so to speak. And if they were able to produce this document, then the residential property owner could remove the tree over any objections that the city would have because the state preempted the city's ordinance. So that preemption went into effect. We have in the tree ordinance, the rules apply unless otherwise provided by law. So I don't believe we made any adjustments to the tree ordinance based on the initial preemption law that the legislature adopted. But the initial preemption law adopted by the legislature was so vague and so ambiguous, it raised a lot of questions as to how to apply it. And as a result of, I guess, some horror stories and reconsideration, the legislature this past session adopted an amendment to the preemption law. And And that amendment, the purpose of the amendment was to clarify what they previously adopted. So what did the legislature clarify? The legislature clarified some key elements of their law. The legislature defined the term residential. So now, unfortunately, my ordinance is not coming up. Here it is. The legislature has now defined residential. Second, the legislature adopted a standard by which the landscape architect and arborist must submit their certification report to justify the removal of a tree on residential property. And in addition, there were another clarification, about, the definition of documentation, what that means. So we have clarifications on the definition of residential, the documentation required, right, for a residential property owner to claim that they have a right to remove the tree. And now we have a definition of residential in the state law. So this ordinance proposes to incorporate the state law clarifications. And so the current code says there are exemptions from tree removal activities authorized and preempted by state law. The ordinance, if amended, will expressly recognize that the removal of trees on residential property which pose an unacceptable risk to persons or property in accordance with Florida statute we've been talking about, those trees can come down.
But we already had that in our city ordinance.
Not based on not based on the preemption. We have to apply the state law when it comes to the tree removal on residential property now as defined by the Florida legislature. So we have to apply the statute under these types of circumstances.
Okay, go ahead. No need to
All right.
beat that to death.
Yeah, so this ordinance is really kind of a conforming amendment with the state law. It's crucial to now understand, the legislature previously just said residential property. They didn't provide a definition. So it was being broadly applied by property owners, as to what residential meant. So now there's a very clear statutory definition that guides us on when preemption applies.
I'm looking for that clarification in my document here.
It's in the ordinance on page 2 of 4 on the bottom.
2 of 4 on the bottom.
Yeah, it says the term quote, residential property,
see it.
close quote.
Okay, I was thinking it was going to be a separate section. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so actually it's one sentence above that. It says further, for purposes of this section, residential property shall mean a single-family detached building located on a lot that is actively used for single-family residential purposes, and that is either a conforming use or a legally recognized non-conforming use in accordance with city's land development regulations. Now we're just talking about detached single-family property that's actively being used for residential purposes. That is the definition of residential property where someone could potentially claim statutory preemption prohibiting the application of the city's code.
How does it apply to a condo?
Condos are not defined, not residential property.
That's all. It's,
As defined now in the law. Prior to
yeah.
the clarification in the law, if it was a residential condo,
So the condo's hanging out
may
there and it's got no regulations whatsoever about food. That's the way this.
the city's ordinance will apply as written.
I see. Okay, well, we just folded in and applied as needed.
So it seems to me when we've had discussions about trees before, the key word was specimen tree. Is that right? Or
Well, that's another Yeah, there is a definition of specimen tree in the city tree ordinance. Specimen trees are those trees with 24 dBH diameter breast height, and they have to be certain species like a live oak. Specimen trees do not include, however, hazardous trees, disease trees, trees that could pose a hazard to property and persons. You know, those are, even if they were 50 dBH, if it was a hazardous tree as defined in the city code, it would not be considered a specimen tree. So they're afforded special protection under the city code when they truly are specimen trees. The city council has to make the decision on the removal of specimen trees, the way the tree code is written today. However, with this preemption, if you had a detached single-family home on residential property as defined in the preemption, and a property owner submitted the appropriate documentation required by the statute, that the specimen tree created an unacceptable risk to persons or property, then we would not follow the procedure. The city council would not have any say any longer, because the state's preemption says the property owner has the right to have that tree removed, even if it was 100 dBH. So we have to, we have to manage the city's ordinance and the preemption now. But at least it's narrowed. The definition of residential properties, I think it's pretty clearly defined now. And the standard that has to be applied under the previous preemption, there was no standard for an arborist or an architect to say that a tree posed an unacceptable risk to persons or property. Now, the law requires that we use this best management practices, the Tree Risk Assessment, second edition, 2017, which is the published little book. So everybody now on whether or not, determining whether or not it poses an unacceptable risk to persons or property, you have to play by the manual. I mean, you have certain standards that have to be applied. It was a Wild West for about a year or so, because I've had cities where literally the documentation was so poor, but there was no guidance. So in one city ended up in an appellate court arguing that they had the right to question the documentation because it was so poor. So courts had to rule on whether or not we had that authority any longer. But at least now under the new law, there is a certain standard that has to be applied, so you can call it much more clearly whether it's a poor report or not. Because if they don't follow the standards, then documentation doesn't have to be accepted for preemption purposes. Maybe it's more than you want to know, but it was a wild west. All over a tree.
Well, we're getting to the
Trees generate a lot of passion in the city of Cape Canaveral.
Well, that's well right here. I say the 37th floor. I live in Harbor Heights. North of Harbor Heights is Villages and Seaport. Villages and Seaport used to be a forest. Kids played back there, wonderful place to have shade and run around and play. Big oak trees, huge oak trees back there. It was an oak forest. Developer came in, broke my heart to watch all that forest be knocked flat, took it down to dirt, built the development. Yours truly was still wet behind the ears P&Z board member. I sat down with a pad and paper and I wrote the tree ordinance. Keep that from happening again. No more shall developers come in and take trees down to dirt and build as they want. And that's why we have the ordinance. I built the grandfather what we have today because I got mad at what they did behind my house. That is a lesson. If you want to make a contribution, get yourself on a board, get into public service, and you can make it count. All right. Anything else? I think we're asking for a motion to adjourn. So have it.
Motion to recommend.
Make a recommendation on this.
I thought we'd already beat that to death. but we
Yeah,
didn't.
well, we did, but
We're not
we
quite
need
sure.
that, we're not quite there.
Not quite there. See, I was just trying to speed it on.
Yeah, all you do is kick the ball now.
Okay, can we have a motion? to approve of this addition to our code?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve ordinance number 18-2022, written as is.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Now we have it. Pat, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Russell,
Four.
Mr. Price,
For the motion.
Ms. Denny,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlepour, Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud,
For the motion.
Mr. Thorpe.
For the motion.
And that is, we're now at the end of the agenda. Is there anything else? Any? Yeah, and of course. That's, this one? Points at it.
No. We've been talking about Ridgewood for a little while.
Yes.
This will be a hearing, I think we have a new scheduled for August 24. And so this will be a hearing on that. I know we've been kind of taking nibbles around this.
Okay, we'll put that on the agenda. Anything else?
Yes, I have something I would like to ask us to maybe review again. When we did the short-term rental guidelines and everything, you know, that meeting that lasted till 10 o'clock and all this, and we had a little bit of a deadline to try to get something on the books so we would have it. I would like to, first off, see if we're getting, how we're doing with the new software and how we are, what the results are from that situation. And then yeah, the Airbnbs, yep. And then I actually think we need a little bit more stricter stuff. There were some things that I researched that I thought we could have put into our ordinances that we just didn't get to discuss.
I like it. Let's put it on the agenda for discussion. I put it on a very local request. I said enforcement. Drive around enforcement of the temporary rental regs. And I told the mayor that you don't have enforcement. All you got is a piece of paper here. You got nothing. You
Right,
still have nothing.
right. Yeah, so I mean, we hired a company to go dig out this, mine this data. Are we getting our bang for our buck? Are we done that? And how are the rules?
Mr. Chairman?
Is anybody tracking, you know, that's some seat?
Mr. Chairman, I will say that at the August City Council meeting, so that's August 19th, I believe, Mayor Pro Tem Kellum has just introduced a discussion item on this exact issue. And we're going, I believe, or maybe it's I think it may be at the September meeting. There's a discussion item at the August council meeting for a presentation to be made at the September council meeting on this exact issue. Year later, where are we? Have we made progress? All of these kind of questions that you're asking, Susan. So, and, you know, this board can have its own conversations. That's fine. I'm just letting you know that that is a topic of discussion at the council level, and that'll be happening here in the next 6 weeks or so.
So, for the rest
so Jimmy and Adam doing it themselves and having to get workload, which will have to work for the council. Let's just go to that meeting, no question.
That's on August 19th.
And it's going to be a discussion item, so Mayor Pro Tem Kellum will be bringing it up. Typically, Anthony, help me out here, it's going to be a discussion item. I'm not sure if they can take official action at discussion items, but I think generally what happens is the council will give staff and the city attorney specific direction on an item. So I anticipate at the September meeting, August and/or September meeting, to be getting some specific direction from the council, if they so choose, on the issue. It may or may not include items that is of concern to this board or you specifically, but
Does that work for you? Just for us to go to that meeting and pile on?
I have to see if I'm going to do it.
Is it unreasonable to ask that you bring back a report from that meeting to us at our next meeting, kind of giving us an overview of what that was all about?
I would like to hear it, and I would like to have another discussion myself, because I voted against the ordinance because I didn't think he had taken it far enough.
Okay, so we've got here a request for the staff to come back with a report from council, and which will stimulate our own discussion about where to go next. Did that get it? All right, well, okay. You have a go-to from us then to bring back something. Bring us back an apple, and we'll chew it and see where we go. We'll have some agenda items. We're not through with this.
So I'm not going to be at the August 24th meeting. So is that the meeting that we were planning to do the report at?
Presentation from pro champs and staff will be made at the September meeting. So probably it would best be if the board were to anticipate something from me after the September council meeting, so sometime in October.
Okay. So no, we expect you to bring us an apple after it's done. And then we'll see where we go with it. Anything else? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address the board and Mr. Dickey. I started to do a lot of research on the mixed-use zoning. I know that's something that's coming up on our agenda. Just wanted to make the board aware that you can do some Google searches out there, and I have been looking at the mixed-use codes that Fort Lauderdale and Mount Dora have written. There's some pretty good information in there. I'm going to continue to research other cities and try and find out what they consider and what they have written into their ordinances. So there's a lot of good information out there. I suggest that you do some research on that. I've got some documents that I'm continuing to study on, but just wanted to make that comment. So it can help us guide what we're going to do here in our city.
Okay, did we get a go-do out of that? We have to go do something, or are we just waiting? Let's see what you bring forward, or what?
Oh, I can bring forward documents if you like. I can push documents to the board or push them to Mr. Dickey and let Dave push them back to the board. It might be the most appropriate way to do it. Dave?
Well, just go show him what you got. You can make a decision on how much to dump in front of us.
Okay. I want to make sure it's good data before I push it out. This is something I've been working on for about a week.
Okay.
So, I've got copies of it and stuff. I've converted them into PDFs. So. You got a bad deal there.
Yeah, I don't want to keep loading his boat. He does good work already. We don't want to mess that up. Yeah. Anything else? All right, let's be adjourned.
Yeah, I've been to Orlando and back. By day, just every day, every day.